Hey everybody, welcome back to Teachers Talking. I am Dustin, here with my
And I'm
co-host.
Ghazali.
So good to be back. We have had a little bit of a hiatus as we got through winter break and the holidays, but we hope everybody is rejuvenated and had a wonderful new year and celebrated all of the holidays with your friends and families the way that you love to. And we're just really excited to be back. As I am so stoked to be back talking to you. I feel like it's been so long.
Me too. Yeah. Where did the time go?
So today we are going to talk about semester two resets or doing a reset following your winter break. And so our episode is called Reignite, Refocus, Refresh Strategies for the New Semester. And we just thought this was a good topic for this podcast, just because we're coming out of winter break. Everybody is maybe just back in school or just going back to school. And we thought this was a really good way to just kick things off and get us back in thinking about how we prepare for the second half of the school year. So, Ghazali, I guess our first question I'd like to ask is how do you reflect on the successes and the challenges that you had during the first semester when you go into your winter break?
Okay. So basically, there are three main things that I do. Firstly, I review my students' performances, looking at how they did for their last exam paper. And from there, I look at things like the overall trends, identifying areas of improvement. And of course, I look for things that I can celebrate, the little achievements, so that we can celebrate their achievements as well, not just focus on the negative stuff. I use the quantitative data, such as the grades and assessment scores, and also qualitative data, because my students do give me feedback on the class engagement levels. Second thing, I evaluate my own teaching strategies. So I reflect on the teaching methods and strategies that I employed during the semester. What could it be improved? I consider the effectiveness of different instructional approaches, materials, and activities. I identify any patterns or trends in student understanding and engagement. Basically, I look at what worked well with my students in the classroom. And lastly, I assess the classroom management. I think that's very important, something that we sometimes we forget. After many years of teaching in schools, right? We think that the classroom management is there, but actually, you can see that certain things that we still need to consider, like how do we make the environment more conducive to learning, and were there any challenges with any particular student's behavior, and how we could improve or change things and do things different. What about you, Dustin? How do you plan for your during your semester break?
Yeah, honestly, I don't have a lot to add because I do almost the exact same thing. I start by looking at the data that I have. Well, I would say I don't do it necessarily in any particular order, but I do look at those same things. I look at the data that I have. We, I've been in schools where mostly we do a benchmark exam every quarter. So I always have some sort of growth to look at from the beginning of the year to the end of the first quarter to the end of that second quarter. So I can actually look at standard based growth based on benchmark exams. I also use the data on how things are going within my own classroom setting. So I look at even student grades because I'm always thinking about any students who are below a C, quite frankly. I want to know how I can get them up. Um, and I want to look at even some of my higher achieving students and think about, are there ways to push them more? So I use all of that kind of data. And then I also look at my own teaching practices. Part of the data that I get, aside from just like academic, is we do student data as a school, each at the mid and then at the end of the year. So I get student data that I can look at. And I also give surveys to my students on a regular basis. So I use that a lot. That actually takes me into looking into my own teaching practices because the feedback that the surveys I give my students are designed to give me feedback on my teaching practice. And so that's really important. That's not necessarily something I'm only doing at winter break, though. That's something I'm doing regularly. So we take those surveys at least once per unit, sometimes twice per unit. So I'm constantly taking my students' feedback and I'm constantly making adjustments and just tweaking things because I'm always just trying to fit their needs and what they want out of the class, right? It's their class. I'm just there to facilitate it. And then last, I also reflect on my expectations, my routines and procedures. I celebrate the things that are going well, and I look for things that need to be tightened up, expectations that maybe haven't been getting met as regularly as I would like, or maybe expectations that need to change or routines that need to change because something wasn't working during the first semester. So I try to think about things like that as well. And I think that way as I go into the next semester.
Awesome. Awesome. Those are really great strategies. I think also we during our break period, that's when we take time to rejuvenate. But we also have to plan ahead. How do we prepare for the new year ahead? So, like for example, for me, I do things like create a back to school plan. That's when I just sit down at a cafe, relax, and then I develop my plans for the first week of school and what comes after that. So I outline specific activities, icebreakers, procedures to establish a positive and welcoming atmosphere in my classroom. And how will I introduce myself to my new cohort of students and set the expectations and build a sense of community within the classroom. So that's one of the things I do, which is to create a back to school plan. And I think during the break, it's also very important to think and reflect on the wellness goals. We live in and we teach. Our job is a very highly stressful occupation. So how do we prioritize our well-being? And we should do that by setting personal wellness goals for the year ahead, right? So this could include maintaining a healthy work-life balance, practicing stress-reducing activities, and
Mhm.
ensuring that we have time for self-care.
Mhm.
So, what about you, Dustin? How do you plan ahead for the year?
I hadn't thought about reflecting on my own well-being as part of my reset process, but I really love that you brought it up that way, because that is something that I do during winter break as part of a reset personally, is thinking about where I've been out of balance and how I need to get back into balance and setting my own boundaries as I enter into a new semester. In fact, last year was a place in which it was during my winter break that I really needed a hard reset for myself. And it's where I set boundaries like taking work email off of my phone, or going in. I was going to ask you about, when you do your planning, do you set specific days or a specific amount of time that you allow yourself to do that planning for school, so that during your break is also a reset for yourself and rejuvenation? Because that's something that I do. I go into break saying, I want to accomplish these things. I will work on these sets of days for X number of hours. And then I do not work outside of those days or outside of those hours. Whether I got that list of things done or not, there's always time. So I prioritize it and I try to get those most important things done. And more times than not, I end up knocking everything out. But I became very particular just last winter break a year ago in setting that and being very, very dedicated to, like, I'm not going to work outside of these days and outside of these times. And then once I closed my work laptop on that last day, um, it went away, and that was that. And I didn't open it again until I got to school that first day back. I wasn't even checking it Sunday before going back, right? Like, I was done with work and I cut it off. So I'm curious, when you do your planning, do you do anything like that, or do you just work until you knock out your list?
Okay, I'm not surprised that that's how you work, Dustin, because having known you all this while now and knowing your background as a school leader, so I can assure our listeners, right, Dustin is a very meticulous person. His schedules are amazing. He has like three different calendars all over his walls, telling him what to do next and when things happen. He's the one that keeps me on track. Yeah, so I guess that's why we work so well, because I'm the polar opposite. I'm more of a feeling person, a relaxed feeling. So I don't have such a meticulous process as Dustin does. I'm I do more of like a block scheduling. So I need to do certain things which are intensive when I'm at my highest point in my energy levels. So I would just set aside in general, these are the things that need to get done. Okay, when do they get done? If they are not urgent, I can take my time. Whenever I feel like I have the energy to do them, then I take them out. Then I make sure I tick them off after I do that. Yeah. But during term time, when everything becomes urgent, I do block scheduling. So I would tell myself, okay, a bit like what Dustin does. So in the day, these are the time slots that I have, 1 hour or 2 hour blocks of
Mhm.
time that I have, which I'm free to do certain things. Then I will schedule them in. Yeah. So I guess I'm more structured, more focused when term time begins. But during the term break, I just have a list of things that I need to get done that I want to do. And when I feel like it, and when I have the energy for it, then I will ensure that I take it off. Yeah,
See,
that's
and
that's something.
that's what I used to do. I used to just be like, here's my list of things to do during break. I'll get to it when I get to it. But what was happening to me, and so I now do block schedule, right? Like I have a calendar that I fill out even now. I block out my days every day, Monday through Friday. But I learned to do that, and it was because I was overdoing it during break. So I was like, oh, I've got 2 weeks, 3 weeks to get through this list of things. And then on some days I'd just wake up and be like, I don't feel like doing anything. So I wouldn't. And I was getting to a place where I was putting it off till the end of break. And then I was jamming out a bunch of things over the last few days of break. And that actually kept me going back to school, feeling like I didn't rejuvenate, even though more days than not, I didn't do a whole lot because I just didn't feel like it. Right. So I found that I motivated myself by scheduling it early on in my break and doing it my first couple of days, and then being like, okay, now I'm done. And but I will say the other thing I do that you kind of mentioned was I think about when I'm most productive. So I will, part of what will motivate me to get my work done is that I set a day aside to do something, right? So I may wake up and be like, I don't really feel like doing it, but I said today's a work day and I need to hold myself to that. I do schedule my work in blocks of time that I know I am most productive, especially for specific types of tasks, because I do some tasks much better early in the morning and I do other tasks much better in the afternoons. Like I'm a lot more creative in my afternoons. I work really well with like data things and planning type things in my mornings. So knowing that about myself, depending on the task, will also depend on like what day or what time of day I choose to work on something during break.
Yeah, I think that's very important. Knowing ourselves, our circadian rhythm, when we work best, when we are most creative, so that we can schedule the more mental activities during those times. And then the less mental activities when you just need to slog through maybe things like marking. You can schedule it for when you are more energetic but less creative. So these are the things that we need to know about ourselves that will be very helpful.
Yeah. And I think that almost took us off a little bit off of a tangent because here we started talking about our wellness during break instead of talking about how we were going to reset things. But I think it's
Well,
also
that's part
important
of
that
it.
it is part of it. And I just really,
Yeah.
coming into today's episode, I was not thinking about that being part of it at all, to be honest. Like I was really thinking about school and my students and like what I was going to do in the second semester to get ready for
I think I,
them
I
to have
I'm
a
still stuck
success
with
in the
the
second
with the last
semester.
episode.
So
Yeah. I'm still stuck with the last episode, with our guests who were talking about the wellness thing. And I think we should make it teachers in general, I think should put their wellness more frontal, because sometimes we have a lot of things on our shoulders. We think about our
yep.
students a lot, but we forget about ourselves.
Yep. And I think that's a great point. But to our original question about like strategies that I use to be thinking about the new semester is very much like you. when I am planning for school, I am not only planning my academic lessons, and I like to plan as far ahead as I possibly can. So I'm not even just thinking about the week or the first 2 weeks that we're back. I'm thinking about an entire next unit. And then I am thinking very purposefully about how am I spending either the first week or the first 2 weeks, depending on my reflection of semester one, going back and actually reestablishing norms, reestablishing expectations and responses to those expectations, reestablishing culture in the classroom. So even thinking through like what are some community building activities that I'm going to do in the second semester to get things going again. So almost like I would do, it's almost like a repeat of what I would do at the very start of the year, because we don't see our kids for such a long period of time. And really here it's between Thanksgiving and then the first of the year, right? Because we go Thanksgiving break and we go back to school for like 3 weeks, and then we go to winter break. And then all of a sudden it's the first, second, third week of January. So because everybody goes on breaks a little bit differently. And I see my same students after the break. You mentioned, do you see different students when you come back from break, or do you see the same students? Because I think that
A
that
mix.
impacts the way that a reset would go, right?
Yeah, a mix. I do follow up classes, but at the same time, when my class graduate, then I would take the new batch of students, so that follow them up. So there's a mix of students that I see.
Okay. Okay. Cool. So what do you do then when you go back to school? What do you do to establish connections, rebuild rapport, and or build rapport with your students when you're coming back from break?
Okay. So this is my checklist. Okay, listeners, I'm gonna give you my secret sauce. What I've been doing for the past 20 years. Okay, so it's been refined over time, but basically, this is what I do. Firstly, most important, a warm welcome. So you begin the first day with a warm welcome, a welcoming atmosphere. Greet your students with enthusiasm, a smile, okay, perhaps even a small welcome activity or a gift on their table. Just put chocolates on the table or something to surprise them as they walk in. Okay, number two, personal check-ins. Those are very important. So take time to personally check in with the students, with each students if you can. Ask them about their break, how exciting it was, what experiences they had, because you will be surprised. Some of the students don't really come from a well-to-do background, so they may not experience
Mhm.
these things. And so you may need to take note of that. Some of the students are going everywhere, Japan, Korea, but others are just working to support the family.
I'm
So
glad
personal
I'm
check-ins.
I'm glad you
Yeah,
said that. And sorry just to jump in, but I will forget
no
this if
problem.
I don't. No, but I'm really glad you said that, because I think one of the things when doing a reset and coming back from break that's really important for people to remember is exactly what you said.
Mm,
So many people come back and ask their students like how their Christmas was and what sorts of presents did you get and that sort of thing. And like it's like the worst thing that we could ask, because we have no idea what kind of background our students
exactly.
are coming from. Some of our students
Yeah.
hate break and can't wait to be back in school, while other students look forward to break, right? But for some
Yes.
students, school is safety, school is food, school is
Yeah.
warmth, and
Yes.
depending on where you teach and who you teach, it's
Mm,
really important to remember that our students all come from such a variety of backgrounds. And so being very conscious of how we build that rapport when we return, and being careful of the questions that we ask our students as we're building that is critical.
mhm.
So I'm really just
Yeah.
thankful you brought that up as part of your checklist.
No problem. Number three, after you've done your personal check-ins, and these are the things that we sometimes forget, share your own experiences. Sometimes we forget to show the other side of us. They only see the formal teacher side, but they don't see the more human side. So share some highlights from your own break or experiences. This can make you more relatable and approachable to your students, helping to bridge the gap. The teacher-student relationship, make it stronger. Okay. Number four, icebreaker activities. They, these are the things you can do. Your lessons haven't begun yet. Make it fun. School doesn't have to be always so stressful all the time. So these activities can be fun, interactive, and provide opportunities for students to share and learn more about their peers and even maybe about yourself. Okay. And while you're doing the icebreaker activities, you are also indirectly reviewing and re-establishing class norms. That's number 5, class norms and expectations. Okay. And if you have time, number 6, set goals together. It's good to set goals for the coming year. And number 7, celebrate achievements. Remember, I said that I was looking for things to celebrate. So this is when you do it. During the break, you look for the results that the students have done, and then you celebrate it when terms begin. All right. And listen actively to the responses of the students. That's number 9. Okay. And if you can, um, schedule individual conferences, especially with the students who need it. Maybe because of the results that you saw when you were reviewing the results, or even when they were sharing their experiences during the semester break, and you saw that, okay, this particular student maybe needs a little shoulder to cry on or a bit more support. So schedule in those individual conferences early so you can nip any problem in the bud. Yeah, so those are the 10 things that I do. I hope I counted them correctly though.
I think you said individual check-ins twice, so maybe your list is only 9.
Oh, only 9. Okay. Last one. Last one. Let me see. I actually have a whole list, so I can just pick one more. Um, create a positive classroom environment. Yeah. So pay attention to your physical environment of the classroom. Ensure that it's inviting, organized, and conducive to learning on the first day. A positive and well-maintained space, right, can contribute to a positive mindset. Yeah.
Absolutely. I had a year where the beginning of the year was so busy that I actually never decorated my room until going back for semester 2. And so my classroom looked completely differently when the kids came back from winter break, and they were like, "Why didn't you do this at the beginning of the year?" I was like, "Cause I never had the time, y'all."
But that's the fun part, Dustin. Did you do like a theme? I know like we like to use like superheroes when Marvel was big, and then Star Wars theme. So you can have all these things. Make the classroom very really fun place to be in.
Yeah. The decorating of the room was never my favorite thing. And so for many years, I've actually had students come in and do it after school and build my bulletin boards for me. I would bring everything in and be like, all right, like do it. And then I would just sit and work while they put my classroom together. So, um, but I love your list because, and I've never put what I do into a list format, but if I did, it would be everything that you listed. And the only other thing that I probably do differently, or maybe not even differently, maybe just not that you mentioned, is I'm always very transparent with my students about the changes that I'm making. So when things are going to shift and be different, when I add a routine or I change an expectation or I adjust a teaching style, because I'm doing that based on their surveys, their feedback, their data, I'm always really transparent with them about what that's going to be. And so I will tell them like, hey, I'm going to make these adjustments. Here's why I'm making these adjustments. I appreciate your feedback. I'm also going to keep doing these things, even though some of you voiced that you'd like to see it done differently. And let me tell you like why I'm not going to do that thing. Right. And so coming back and just being real with my kids about the reset, I think is also an important piece. Um, and my favorite things is like using that sort of as a unit 0 to refresh and remind about things, but then to do the community building. Like this is where I love to do activities like an escape room as we come back, or some sort of like scavenger hunt activity or teamwork activity, where I like to have kids like survival type things that are just fun yet promote collaboration and teamwork. Um, because again, that's just a really big part of culture building. Like I just more than anything try to build in as many activities as I can to make students feel that they're a part of the classroom and that it's their classroom. So, and that goes as far as taking the time to ask them about their opinions and what do you want expectations to be. And if some of you are telling me in surveys that you're having a difficult time learning because of the behaviors of others. Let's talk about what behaviors are bothering you together as a group, what you'd like to see differently out of your peers, and what we can do about that together. How can you guys remind one another? And, what do you want to see a response from me be, et cetera, et cetera. And a lot of times activities like that and just conversations like that help to curb other behaviors that were happening during the first semester, because more times than not, peers don't want to let their peers down. They may not care about whether they're letting their teacher down or not, but they often, when their peers say that something's bothering them, more times than not, kids will hear each other. So I think that's also an important part of what I do when I'm resetting.
No, that's awesome. Yeah, and basically from what I can see, we have quite a substantial list or checklist of things that we do when we reconnect with the students. But one of the areas I think that's very, very important is this aspect of establishing and reinforcing, classroom expectations and culture at the beginning of the new semester. Because the way that you establish and reinforce your classroom culture, right, or expectations, right, uh, will resonate throughout the whole year. So it is
Mm-hmm.
important to start from the beginning. What do you think about that, Dustin?
Yeah, I agree completely. Earlier, you mentioned about coming back on day one and greeting your students and being friendly, and asking them about their experiences and how their break was and whatnot. And I think that that's very important. So even being at the door, greeting students as they come in is absolutely one of the norms that I have, because I believe that we make our own weather in the classroom. Our classroom is what we want it to be. So the energy that we bring every single day impacts our students. So if we show up and we're in a bad mood, and then our students are going to sense that vibe, and you're not going to have a good day. And I do know, I told you I'm very transparent with my students. If something happens in my day and I'm frustrated and I haven't had a chance to reset, I will straight up tell my kids, like, right away at the start of class, I will just say, hey, I'm not having a good day today. I just need to put that out there right now. Like, please know and give me some grace today. I need it. I'm sorry, but I'm being real with you. And those are actually end up being some of the best days that I have, simply because I am being transparent about my feelings with my kids when I'm down, and they sense and they know, and then they do what they can to try to like lift me back up. And a lot of times when I have those moments, that's exactly what happens. They end up lifting me back up, and I'm not where I was when that class period or that day began, right? But I have found that the days when I haven't been transparent and I've been kind of moody, and we all have those days, those are some of my worst days, because my students feed off of my mood. And I think the same thing can happen when our kids come in and they're having a mood. We can either allow that to impact us or not. And so part of all of this reset is recognizing that for ourselves and recognizing that in our students. Like, if you do have students who give you anxiety or stress on a regular basis, thinking about that during break and trying to think about ways that that can be curbed, that you could work with that student coming back. So I think those one-on-one conversations you talked about are really important to help establish that. But otherwise, it's right back to routines and expectations, right? So it's this is the way this classroom operates. Like, yes, I know you just did it for a semester, but we're going to review all of my expectations anyways, because Lord knows you forgot most of them while you were gone. So I do a full review of every routine that is in our class. We remind each other. A lot of times we'll use the same lessons that I did to set up routines, procedures, and expectations at the beginning of the year. I will bring it right back and do the exact same thing to start the second semester, because I want to start strong with the structure that we need for the success that we need in the second half of the year. Because the second half of the year is really where it's at, right? Like, that's where we test. That's it. Like, that's where we test. That's where the big measurements happen. And so the second half of the
Yeah.
year is really important for everybody to have taken steps forward and to begin that growth process. much more than semester one, right?
Yes. Yep.
How about you?
I
How
think
do you go back to reinforcing all those classroom expectations and routines?
okay. Before that, I think one thing that you mentioned that resonates with me is the part where you say that sometimes we are not in the mood to teach, and then teachers feel this guilt that we are not in the mood to teach because that's our job to teach. That we are teachers, we should be teaching, and that and even like leadership is important because sometimes school leaders expect us to leave our baggage outside the
Mm,
classroom when we come in, but that's not how humans work. Right? So I guess that's what we try to do. If you can, you leave whatever baggage you have outside the classroom and you come in, you're a teacher. But if you can't, don't be guilty about it. Don't feel guilty about it. Sometimes, like what Dustin did, is good. You talk about it with the class, right? If it's not overly sensitive, you can say, "Hey, today something really made me feel bad. Um, can we brainstorm how we can help me solve this problem?" So you're turning it into like a teachable moment, right? So the class sometimes when you bring in a bit of authenticity into the classroom, it really engages the class, it motivates the class, and these students really want to try to help you. So they really give you very good ideas. And you
yep.
never know, some of the students may be facing something similar to what you are facing, and doing this helps them as well, right? And of course, if it's really, really bad, what I do is just I will go to my stash of extra worksheets that I've created during the break. That's another thing to add to the list. Create your emergency stash of extra worksheets. Sometimes you just need to turn to them because either you're sick, you can't be in school, somebody has to take over your class, so at least there's some work for the students to do. Or when for times like this, you take something interesting for the class, or like a comprehension exercise, and just say, "Okay, class, today we're doing a comprehension exercise. Please complete this piece of work." Then you can sit at your table and reflect, meditate, and get back into your zone. Yeah, so that's the bit that I want to talk about. What you mentioned earlier, regarding this addressing, reinforcing classroom expectations and culture. I think once you've set the classroom culture, right, and that's where your classroom decor comes in as well, the theme of the class. Yeah, so sometimes like for us last year we had a theme of like superheroes. Then on our walls we'll have all the superheroes. We'll have Thor, Wonder Woman, Superman, and then we link those characters to values that we want to have in the class. See,
Yep.
and then we link them to goals that we want to achieve in the class. And then every time when they come into the class, so I would just say, today you got to be Thor, right? You got to be persistent. You got to push through the lesson. It's going to be tough, but you can do it because you're a superhero. Okay, and then you're reinforcing it in a fun and interesting manner, rather than you
Yeah.
go into class and say, "Okay, class, remember today what we're doing? Number one, we'll be persisting. Number two, we'll be questioning. Number three, we'll be doing feedback." It doesn't work that way, right? So you got to bring more fun and excitement into the class. So basically, that's something that you can consider.
I like the linking of the superheroes to the values. That's a cool
Yes,
way to be like, I really want to see your Superman today and know that that means
yes,
their grit or whatever. So,
yeah.
I like that. Very nice.
So I think
So,
we have covered quite a fair bit today.
yeah,
Um, we've gone through introducing the what we did for the break period and reflecting on the successes and challenges of the previous semester. We've done the planning for success, what we can do during our winter break to make it fruitful, and of course to rejuvenate. Don't forget about that, rejuvenating ourselves during the winter break. Uh, and then how do we reconnect with students when we are back in the classroom? So the checklist of things that you can do, and then of course the setting of the classroom culture and expectations, and how to really turn it into a culture. That means something that's in their DNA of the class. So when they come into the classroom, they're ready to learn, and you are ready to teach. Those are things that are important that we have covered. Do you have anything to add, Dustin?
no, sir, you have summarized it quite nicely. It was a really wonderful conversation to get back to doing this. So, Really
As
glad to be
always,
back at it and excited to
yes,
keep producing some more.
yeah. I hope we have thawed out, melted the icicles enough to really get this going again for this year. And we have some really exciting episodes planned ahead, right? Our next episode comes out on January 29th, and we will be dealing with building relationships and community. Uh, Dustin,
Absolutely.
you have any surprises in hand for that?
Hopefully we will have our next guest for that episode as well. And
Ah,
then as we are looking ahead, we're looking to hopefully have guests for our next few episodes here. So unfortunately for this one, it didn't work out, but it was nice to come back from our little hiatus and just have the two of us. But now moving forward, hopefully we're going to have a guest with us every single episode. So I think that that's super exciting, and I'm really looking forward to talking to more teachers. So if there's anybody out there listening and you would like to talk about a topic, you should definitely hit
yes.
us up, because we would love to have you on to chat with us and be another teacher talking.
Yeah, more teachers talking. Always a good thing.
All
Okay,
right. Well,
so
thank
with
you
that,
everybody for listening. Ghazali, thank you.
thank you, Dustin. See you again in 2 weeks' time. Bye bye.
Bye, everybody.